Hi guys and gals, just wanted to share with you a log store idea I've had. I've been storing wood in this log store for about 2 to 3 years and it works very well. Um, the reason I have 3 bays is simply because the piece of wood that you will always want, which is the oldest, driest piece, will always be at the back. So by dividing the log store into bays, you can then stack it according to time. So I fill each bay and then rotate round. Now the construction is based on round posts which are just simply dropped into holes in the ground and cemented in. I wanted a log cabin type effect, so what I used is garden half round stakes, which are normally used for fencing, and they're screwed into the round uprights fairly simply. I'm also growing up a clematis so it covers the log store and keeps the neighbours happy. I've also added a gutter, and the gutter basically takes the water and it goes down the length and it fills up a rain butt which is hidden behind this gate, so it's not on site. I then take a hose from the downpipe and run it back, and I can then water the clematis and the one next to it fairly simply. So that gives me a supply of water without having to do anything other than just drop down the hose pipe when I want to water. When I finish watering, I simply lift the hose pipe up so that the end is higher than the level of water in the butt, and I don't even need a tap on the butt, although there is one. Okay, so the construction. Basically, as I said, you have 6 holes and 6 fairly large, I think these are 4-inch posts. And then when I put the slats, I used a smaller bit of wood in between the slats so I had even spacing, and they're simply screwed. In terms of the top, I decided to use square timbers, and they are simply bolted through on. That provides a base for the roof. Show you the other end. And somewhere to store your logs while they're drying. This last piece here is simply decorative. It's a piece of hornbeam. I like the shape at the top. I'll show you that from outside. It just made it a little bit more, slightly more rustic, and it filled in the edge. Okay, so going back to the actual bays itself, the size of the bay was based on the size of pallet I could get. And these are available quite often. You'll find them on industrial estates. They just want to get rid of them, so sometimes you can pick them up for nothing. What I've done, this one has got gratings in it, and the idea is to let air in underneath the wood pile to allow air to percolate through. The flow of air is important so that the wood dries out. These particular pallets had a square sections on each corner, and to give it a bit more rigidity, what I did was I filled each of those with a mixture of cement. Okay, so it then provides a very, very firm base. In addition, the pallet just happened to be the same size as a bit of 2x4, so I stuck a couple of pieces of 2x4 in just to give me some additional rigidity. It's been there for 3 years. I've just swept it out, ready to restack, and it's been fine. It's worked very well. The amount of weight on it is quite considerable, so you can imagine that is highly closely stacked, and you get an awful lot of wood. So there's probably 2 cubic meters plus in that one section. I find that I use somewhere in the region of 6 to 8 cubic meters of wood a year to heat the house, but the stove is going 24/7 most of the winter, although it's not that cold in the UK. The roof, in the UK you can buy stuff, it's called Correlux. It's basically a corrugated roofing. It's made of fiberboard, and you just simply tack it on with these studs, which is a nail with a piece of plastic on top of it. They're supposed to last about 15 years, but we'll see, maybe longer. It's used an awful lot more in France than it is in the UK. They seem quite happy with it. So it's tar-based bitumen over some sort of cardboard. You could have, of course, used aluminium, or you could use tile-shaped stamped aluminium or galvanised sheet. The reason I chose black was so that it heats up, and that will then cause the air to rise through the stack, and you'll get a good air circulation. Okay, well that's basically it. My next step will be to start stacking it, and I'll show you how I do that. It really depends on how you wish to deal with your wood, and how you source it. This particular pile here came from an arborist who was cutting down a local tree, and I ended up barrowing 4 or 5 foot lengths of oak about 200 yards to my house. Then I chopped them up into roughly 9 or 10 inch sections, depending on where the knots were within the logs. So I tend to cut both sides of a knot, so that something like that, for example, has been cut on either side of the knot, so that it's easier to split. And I don't particularly care if the section isn't the right length. It just goes into a separate pile ready for stacking. You also end up with a load of odd shapes. The world's not perfect. If it was, every tree would come like that, but especially with oak, it doesn't. It tends to come with nasty bends and even right angle bends. So this lump here is a typical joint. I might try splitting that with an axe, or you could just leave it as it is, because it will fit in the stove. Here's the sort of typical stuff I'm working from. I'll put these on a saw bench and cut them up later. Whilst I'm in the process of splitting, what I do is I tend to pick out the items which I think will stack well. So, because it's a different length, I tend to sort them. I put them on a brick wall, and there at this end, for example, you can see it's slightly over the length of brick. So bricks in the UK are about 9 inches, so that's probably about 10 inches. When I split one log, it will go into 4 or more pieces. They'll all be the same length. I move along the brick wall with the longest at one end and the shortest at the other. That may seem total overkill to some people, but it certainly makes stacking it a lot easier. Here are some short lengths. They're just on the 9 inches, and some of these are a little bit more awkward in shape, so they won't stack as well. Other items like these pieces burn fine. As you can see there, it's got a nice little knot in it. That will go up to temperature. By splitting it, you make the seasoning occur quicker. Something like that. Again, I might put an axe through it to make it into two small bits. Depends how much time you want to spend on doing this. As you're splitting, you'll end up with all the odd shapes. So I'm looking to pull out straight pieces which will stack well to make walls, and the odd pieces will be thrown in at the back. Everything burns, so I don't want to waste anything. But if you say, look at a piece like that, for example, it's not going to stack at all, but it will burn, so that will get thrown in at the back somewhere. Okay, I'll get back to you when I've stacked a few. Hope you've enjoyed watching. If so, press the like button.